There's no need even to have a college degree at all, or even high school. I mean, if somebody graduated from a great university, that may be an indication that they will be capable of great things, but it's not necessarily the case. You know, if you look at, say, people like Bill Gates or Larry Ellison, Steve Jobs, these guys didn't graduate from college. But if you had a chance to hire them, of course, that would be a good idea.
Yeah, okay.
So, you know, just looking just for evidence of exceptional ability, and if there's a track record of exceptional achievement, then it's likely that that will continue into the future.
How would you educate your 5 boys?
Actually, I created a little school. Yeah.
What kind of school? Could you describe to us?
Sure. I mean, it's small. It's only got 14 kids now, and it'll have 20 kids in September. It's called Ad Astra, which means to the stars. That's maybe a bit different from most other schools, is that there aren't any grades. There's no like not grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 type of thing. I'm making all the children go in the same grade at the same time, like an assembly line.
I know.
You know, because some people love English or languages, some people love math, some people love music, and they have different abilities at different times. It makes more sense to cater the education to match their aptitudes and abilities. So I think that's one principle. How would I describe myself? Well, I mean, I seem to have a high innate drive, and that's been true even since I was a little kid. You know, really had a very strong drive. Did all sorts of risky things when I was a kid that like, why did I do those things? They're crazy. It's important to teach problem solving, or teach to the problem, not to the tools. So this would be like, let's say you're trying to teach people about how engines work, or you know, you could start by a more traditional approach would be to say, well, we're going to teach you all about screwdrivers and wrenches, and you're going to have a course on screwdrivers, a course on wrenches, and all these things. And this is a very difficult way to do it. A much better way would be like, here's the engine. Now let's take it apart. How are we going to take it apart? Oh, you need a screwdriver. That's what the screwdriver is for. You need a wrench. That's what the wrench is for. And then a very important thing happens, which is that the relevance of the tools becomes apparent.
So all your 5 boys are in that school?
Yes.
Until when? This is from
I don't know.
preschool
So far
to...
it's only 1-year-old. But they like it.
They like it?
Yeah.
And you want to keep them away from regular schools?
No, I just didn't see that the regular schools, they weren't doing the things that I thought should be done. Like, you know, those 2 principles, they weren't adhering to those principles. So I thought, well, let's see what we can do. Maybe creating a school will be better. And I actually hired a teacher from the school they were at, who also agreed with me that there was a better way to do it.
Have they surprised you in a way of their innovative thinking?
Yeah, it seems to be going pretty well. I mean, the kids really love going to school. I think that's a good sign. You know, I mean, I hated going to school when I was a kid. It was torture. So the fact that they actually think vacations are too long, like they want to go back to school. You know, between Gates and Jobs and Ellison, all 3 of those were technologists, but with different types of skills. You know, Jobs was obviously very good with aesthetics, and you know, he understood technology, of course, and he really understood what people wanted even when they didn't know themselves. And he was not afraid to, you know, break boundaries. But like say, like Gates would probably be better at you know, sort of raw engineering and technology than Jobs, but not as good on aesthetics. But I mean, for all of these guys, they're obviously very driven, and they're very talented, and yeah, and they're able to attract great people to build a company. I care a lot about the truth of things, and trying to understand the truth of things. I think that's important. You know, if you're going to come up with some solution, then the truth is really, really important, I think. I try to like, think of. I mean, it's difficult to obviously come up with like things that are praise for oneself, you know, or like there's bad and good here, but I think like sometimes they're just like the things that seem quite clear and obvious to me, and I don't understand why they aren't so obvious to everyone. The ability to attract and motivate great people is critical to the success of a company, because a company is it's a group of people that are assembled to create a product or service. That's the purpose of a company. People sometimes forget this elementary truth, and so if you're able to get great people to join the company and work together towards a common goal, and you sort of have a relentless sense of perfection about that goal, then you will end up with a great product. And if you have a great product, lots of people will buy it, and then the company will be successful.
Yeah.
But really, it's pretty straightforward, really. I mean, yeah, that's the reason for it. I feel fear quite strongly, but if what we're doing is if what I'm doing is I think is important enough, then I just override the fear.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's not as though I feel like more strongly than I would like. If the stakes are high, if it's really important, then I will overcome the fear and just do it anyway. Mm-hmm. But essentially, I mean, drive overrides fear, but I feel the fear. It's kind of annoying. I wish I didn't.
Okay.
I wish I felt it less. Uh-huh. SpaceX, I thought had the lowest chance of success. I mean, I thought both Tesla and SpaceX would fail at the beginning.
You saw it?
Yeah, sure.
Really?
Of course.
But nevertheless, you put all your money in that. In both.
I expected to lose it. Well, technically, what I thought was, well, I'll take half the money from PayPal, and if I lose half of it, that's okay. But then, of course, the companies encounter difficulties, and then I have a choice of either let the company die or put, all the money into the companies. And so I really didn't want the companies to die, so I put all the money in the companies.
Yeah.
And then I had to borrow money from friends to pay living expenses. Coming to North America was my best idea, because I think these things would not have been accomplished almost anywhere else. It's really hard to start a company, but and particularly California, Silicon Valley is very conducive to startup companies, and so whenever I'd read books in South Africa, it would seem like the cutting edge of technology was in Silicon Valley, and so that's when I wanted to come and I wanted to move to this mythical place.
Okay.
I mean, overall, I think I'm pretty happy with where things are. It's hard not to be, honestly.
Yeah.
He's such a smart guy, and he's really the most driven person I think I've ever met. When I first got hired by SpaceX, we did an interview with 60 Minutes, and they interviewed Elon and myself, and Scott Pelley was the anchor. He talked to us, and he said to me, "Why did you leave NASA and come work for SpaceX? You had like the best gig in the world, going up on rockets and stuff. Why would you do that?" I said, well, if you can go back in time and you were a young engineer and you had the opportunity to get in on the ground floor and work with Howard Hughes when he was doing all the crazy stuff he was doing in his day, wouldn't you want to be a part of that? But then I realized as soon as I said that, oh my God, I just made a terrible strategic error. I compared my boss to Howard Hughes, and things didn't end up that well for Howard.
He went crazy, right?
He went kind of crazy. He became
washed his hands too much and
germaphobe. He was peeing in jars. We were driving in a rental car, just the two of us. In Florida, we had a meeting at NASA, and we were driving back to the airport to get on his airplane to come back to LA. And I'm driving the car, he's sitting in the passenger seat, and I said, "Hey boss, remember that time we're on TV and I compared you to Howard Hughes, I just want you to know I was comparing you to the young, dashing, starlet dating Howard Hughes, not the old, decrepit, peeing in jars, fingernail guy." And all I got back was silence. And now I'm really scared, right? I'm sitting there waiting for him to say something. And Elon will do this. And he did this on your show, right? He kind of if you pose to him a serious question, he'll consider it. And he'll kind of go into this almost like a trance. He'll stare off into space and you can see the wheels turning. He's focusing all of his intellect, which is considerable, on this one question. So I waited. And then he turned back to me and he said, I don't think it's an apt comparison. Why? I'm curious, why do you think that? And he said, well, none of Howard's designs, as brilliant as they were, ended up really changing the way we live our lives. So we don't send, like he made the Spruce Goose, which is an incredible airplane. It was all wood, trying to solve the problem during the war of rationing. So that was his objection, was not that like I was comparing him to some creep, but that it's really important to him to have the legacy of drastically impacting the way all of us live our lives, so kind of the way Steve Jobs did or others that really move the ball downfield for humanity. That's what's driving him.
He's such an unusual human. Is he thinking along these lines of charted out progress?
Oh, yeah. He's, in fact, he measures pretty much every major decision by whether or not it brings the day when we have a self-sustainable colony on Mars sooner or later. That's the prism by which he makes every single decision he makes it through that prism.
Jesus.
Yeah. So he's got an idea, and he'll keep pushing, and he gives us aggressive timelines that we have to work to, and we work really hard to try to meet him. It's hard when you're doing stuff that's this complicated to predict exactly how long it's going to take. So, we end up often falling a little bit behind, but we do our best.
That's the case, though, with everything that's that crazy, right? He's doing so many different things at the same time. It's almost impossible.
I mean, he does have all the advantages of wealth, which helps, So, like, he'll have meetings with us, and he'll walk out of his last meeting, and he'll walk across the street to Hawthorne Airport, hop on his jet, and he's at Palo Alto in a couple hours, and he can be first thing in the morning at Tesla.
Right.
And he's got a staff that helps him, and, he's got those advantages. But that isn't in any way describe what or that doesn't explain why he's able to do what he does. I don't know how he does it, to be honest.
Well, he's the next stage of humanity.
Yeah.
If people are evolving, he's like looking at us from the next spot. He's like, hey guys, I've got some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, he's just an idea factory, and what's really remarkable to me is the breadth of his knowledge. I mean, I've met a lot of super smart people, but they're usually super smart on one thing. And he's able to have conversations with our top engineers about the software and the most arcane aspects of that. And then he'll turn to our manufacturing engineers and have discussions about some really esoteric welding process for some crazy alloy. And he'll just go back and forth. And his ability to do that across all the different technologies that go into rockets and cars and everything else he does, that's what really impresses me.
Well, also the lack of burnout, because he's been doing it at this incredible rate, 16 hours a day for how long?
His whole life, I think.
That's nuts.
I know.
And he's still hungry for it. And he's still taking on these new projects and new ideas. And
yeah, at that pace, 7 years was about as much as I could take. I was like, I need to do something else.
Yeah, I just don't. I'm very happy he exists.
Yeah.
But it's very confusing to me. I just feel so stupid when I'm around him. Like the conversations I've had with him, I'm like, God damn, I'm dumb.
No.
You gotta do what you gotta do with what you got.
I won't go that far.
So his ultimate goal is to create some sort of a colony on Mars, but he believes that this technology will continue to expand to the point where we will be leaving our solar system. We will be making human trips into other solar systems, into actual deep space.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, hopefully that's, at some point, if we're going to survive, if you take the really long view, the solar system's not going to last forever.
Right.
It's going to last plenty long. If my kids are listening at home, don't worry.
They're freaking out right now,
Yeah,
especially a 2-year-old.
We got-
Oh, no, Daddy said we're going to die.
No, we got plenty of time.
Couple billion years, kids. Relax. It's not in our lifetime.
They're so funny. But eventually, we're going to have to find a new home if we're going to last forever. And we all hope that we last forever as a species, right? So, or at least most of us do. So, eventually we got to get there, but we got plenty of time. In the short term, the important thing is at least getting out, so we're not in just one place in the solar system, because this, something bad could happen to this planet, and we got no backup.
Right, particularly if there's a natural situation, supervolcano, asteroid impact.
Or, we're doing a pretty good job of trashing this place all on our own.
Yes.
We don't really need an asteroid to hit us. We're kind of going down the road of making this place uninhabitable.
Well, what we need is someone like Elon who concentrates on the solutions. I mean, he's obviously got a full plate, many full plates, but someone like him to concentrate on solutions to some of the environmental problems that we've created for ourselves here.
Well, that was the thought behind Tesla. I mean, so Tesla's kind of like Plan A, save this planet, and SpaceX is kind of Plan B, if you look at it that way.
It's just so weird to have a guy like that amongst us.
Yeah, especially have him as your boss. It was really weird.
Have you talked to him at all about simulation theory?
We never. The thing is, every time I talk to him, we focused on, and this is what he does. He focuses on the thing that we are working on. So that's one of the ways he does his time management. That's one of the ways he is able to do all these things. It's like he doesn't sit around and BS with you about like what's going on with was it Neuralink, the company where he's making the chips that go in your head.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. That's the other thing he does.
That one.
He's changing the way humans interface with data.
He never said to me like, Garrett, what do you think about having a chip in your head? That like never. He doesn't do that. He talks to the people who really know about chips and putting chips in people's head. He talks to them about it. So.
Are you going to sign up for that?
No.
Your face.
The other day, I heard myself say, yes, you may watch that episode of The Simpsons that they made about your dad. Because the man in question, their father, my ex-husband, or as I sometimes like to think of him, my baby daddy, so, is the visionary Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX. I met him when I was 18, he was 19. We were at college. He would call me up. He always had classical music playing in the background. And he would ask me out, and I would say no. And he would call me up again, and he would ask me out, and I would say no. And it went on like this until we ended up living together in an apartment in the Bay Area, which we shared with 3 roommates and a miniature dachshund who was not house-trained. And by the time we divorced, we were living in a house in Bel Air with no roommates and a miniature dachshund who still was not house-trained. So it's a really funny Simpsons episode. Elon has this meaningful relationship with Homer. It's very romantic. And at one point, the Smithers character says to another character that somebody like Elon must have a darkness in his soul. This line leaped out at me because I actually think a lot about creativity and darkness and the larger-than-life nature of these people that we call visionaries and geniuses, or as my son likes to say, genii. And darkness does not have to mean evil. It can refer to anything that has not yet been brought out into the light, that lives in the space beyond boundaries, beyond our comfort zone, where a lot of us do not want to go. The writer Lucy H. Pierce has a quote that I like a lot. She says, "As creatives, our job is to uncover what lies in the darkness and give it new life, new identity." And I realize that artists and entrepreneurs are a lot alike, and that they are both obsessed with creating something out of nothing, with pulling value from the dark. So when I was preparing this talk, I said to Elon, so do you have any advice that I could maybe give to bright young things in the audience who might want to grow up to be you one day? And he did say something which I'll get to at the end, but he also said, I don't know if they would still want that if they really knew what it's like to be me. And it made me think that before we call these people visionaries, before they have that kind of success, we have other words for them. We call them, geek, or outsider, socially awkward, weird, a little different, odd one out. During my years with Elon, I became familiar with a distinct and deeply tribal mentality known as engineers. And once when my dad came to visit, I was taking him to see Elon at Elon's first company, Zip2. And we were crossing through the office park, and we saw these lanky dudes in jeans and t-shirts, and they were racing these remote-controlled contraptions around the parking lot and banging them into cars. And my dad said to me, "Oh, are these the children of the engineers?" And I said, "No, Dad, these are the engineers." And when Elon and I would travel, and we had to fill out those forms at customs that wanted to know your occupation, you know, Elon never wrote down CEO or King of the World or Studley International Playboy. He wrote engineer. And he wore jeans and t-shirts to work. And whenever we went shopping for clothes, or later consulted with the stylist whose name was Martin, he would say, "No, you don't understand. I can't look cool or hip because I have to look like an engineer." And one of the things that he told me, although I don't know if it's as true now as it was back then, was that engineers could not quite figure out why it was that the suits made the big money when it was the engineers who actually built the stuff that they were selling. And meanwhile, the suits would listen to the engineers talk, and they would have no idea what they were saying. And that's when I realized that Elon was somebody who had learned to speak both languages, and he could move between the tribes because he was an engineer in a suit, and he brought together worlds. And this is what an engineer does. I mean, this is what a visionary does. They not only create something new, but they become the living embodiment of it. They don't just tell us a new story. They are that story. And soon they don't even have to open up their mouths. They just walk into the room. I recently read a profile on Elon, and he's quoted as saying something to a friend, and this happened during the time we were still married together. And he said something to this friend that he never said to me. And he was saying that he was prepared to sacrifice everything, his entire fortune, to get a rocket into orbit. And he said, "I don't care if Justine and the kids and I end up living in Justine's parents' basement. I'm going to make this happen." And so I read this, and I kind of wanted to go back in time and go up to him and take him by the shoulders and look him very seriously in the eyes and say, "Have you seen my parents' basement?" So I'd like to wrap up by getting to Elon's advice, which is to always go beyond memorizing formulas, passing tests, to always go deep into the underlying principles of a subject, to track any problem down to the root cause buried in the dirt in the dark. And I would add to that and say, be brave enough, be bold enough, and be insane enough to see things more completely, more vividly, more fully than everybody else around you. And refuse to look away from what you see and what you know, even if people want to burn you at the stake. Because visionaries, they take all that passion and their badass personalities and their mad skills and the mastery of their chosen subject matter, and they use it to put themselves on the line, unlike anybody else you'll ever meet. And it's this that allows them to open up windows into another deeper reality in which transformation is possible and things of awe happen on a regular basis. Because in the beginning, we don't trust them because we think they're crazy, but by the end, we trust them because we know they're crazy. They're crazy enough to accomplish anything and risk it all in order to bring us something new to believe in. They might make lousy husbands and terrible wives. They might be the friend who never sends you a birthday present and forgets to show up for coffee. But they bring light to the dark, and they show us the universe. Keep the channel open. Thank you.
Given enough time, humanity will go extinct, because the counterpoint will be humanity will live forever, and I think that's just unlikely. So whether there will be some other form of consciousness that evolves after humanity, I hope so, but we don't know for sure. It would be wise not to just assume that, if we're gone, that there'll in the future be some other form of consciousness. Maybe, maybe not. Earth's 1.5 billion years old. The sun is slowly expanding. As the sun expands, those over millions of years, the temperature on Earth will rise. and eventually the sun will engulf Earth, and everything will be incinerated. There's different schools of thought here, but things may get hot enough on Earth within maybe 500 million years where Earth may be uninhabitable. So that's sort of a combination of the various cycles of Earth, because on a very geological timescale, Earth actually has gone through snowball phases and sort of very hot phases. And if you have a very hot phase of Earth combined with the sun expanding, that could really be a mass extinction event. And one of the things, like for an Earth timing standpoint, 500 million years would only be 10% longer than Earth has existed thus far. Therefore, if consciousness or civilization had taken 10% longer to evolve, it wouldn't have evolved at all. On a large time scale, we're kind of making it just in time. Like the thing that tends to happen is, like, once the birth rate starts going down, it seems to accelerate in its downward trajectory. Mm-hmm. Like Japan is a leading indicator here. It's insane.
They're about to collapse.
No,
population
like
collapse.
Nutty. They lost 600,000 people last year. That negative 600,000 last year. And Japan is like pretty close to being the most, like, their life expectancy is like 85. Mm-hmm. So, like, that's the only thing. That was what was keeping the population plummeting before. But now, despite having like the world's longest lifespan, they're still losing population.
Oh wow!
It's saying something.
Yeah, it is saying something.
So,
it seems to me the rate of that decline is such one that's going to be not really able to be turned around. We kind of got to plan for what we do in spite of it happening. Yeah, like.
Well, if that trend continues, Japan's just going to flat out disappear, mm-hmm. As will most countries in the world. I'm just saying, if that trend continues, hopefully it doesn't. But if it does, this is going to be... I don't know what China's going to do. Like, China's going to have like a period of time of great prosperity of like the next 10 years, and then, but China's at like roughly half replacement rate. You know, they got rid of the one-child policy several years ago.
Yeah.
Then made it a two-child policy. Now it's a three-child policy.
Okay.
Birth rate unchanged. And Japan never had a one-child policy, and they still went that path. So the current trend is not good from a birth rate standpoint. I'm trying to set a good example.
Another reason why we need another civilization on another planet.
Yeah. The number of humans it's not trending well. I think a lot of people are under the impression that, like, you know, the current number of humans is unsustainable on the planet, and this is totally untrue.
Yeah.
We could double the number of humans and be okay, and still keep the rainforests. The population density is actually very low, and most parts of the world have no people in them. So if you like fly over the country, you know, from like LA to New York or something, and you look down and say, like, what percentage of the time, if you dropped a bowling ball, would you hit someone? Even in LA, like, you think LA's got a lot of people, but you look at the actual, if you like just looked at, say, what cross-sectional area is human, like the cross-section of like, you know, you take like several blocks in LA and make the houses and cars translucent, mm-hmm. and look at, okay, well, looking at from above, what percentage of the cross-section of the area is humans? It's almost nothing. It's below 1% in LA.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that giant ball of flesh they did that if you combined every human into it? They said in New York City? You've seen it, right? The big ball of goo of like all of humans pushed into one thing. It would like sit in Central Park.
That's it?
That's it?
And like it's a little bit taller than the tallest skyscraper. It's not very big at all.
If you just had like a cuboid of humans.
Cuboid of humans. It's not like
on a single floor, you could fit all humans in New York City without on one floor without even having.
What do you mean on one floor?
I mean, like
surface area.
Yeah.
How thick would that human pie be?
No, it's just one human tall. I'm gonna say there's no humans. It's no, without stacking. If people like live in some bustling city, they think humans must be everywhere. But actually, there are very few cities. Like no place in America has the density of Manhattan. And then even if you've got like a sort of what seems like a dense city like LA, the actual cross-sectional area that's human is small, like less than 1% of the area is human. So that means that if you dropped a cannonball, that doesn't bounce too much. The probability of hitting a human is extremely low.
Wow, that's interesting.
We've had pieces from rockets in multiple nations re-enter the tanks and crash uncontrolled and not hit anybody many times.
When we had the space tragedy, like on entry, it rained debris across the entire United States, and I don't think there were any injuries at all.
Yeah.
Like the entire,
a
lot of debris. Like they recovered most of the material from the shuttle. But and 0 people were hit, I believe.
And here's an interesting part of that: is it was going not vertical,
Yeah.
it's going around the Earth, which increases the probability.
No, it's coming in from orbital, so it's going parallel, more or less parallel to the Earth's surface, and start breaking up. I believe over the U.S.
Like a crop dust,
or at least certainly like none of the parts fell in the ocean. when you're going orbital, you're going parallel to the Earth's surface, roughly 25 times the speed of sound. So the shell is decelerating and breaking apart and the debris is raining down on the U.S. and no people were hit. So the population decline problem, I think, is possibly the biggest risk to civilization. It's certainly one of the biggest risks. First of all, I think people really need to. A lot of people think that there's too many humans on the planet and the planet can't sustain this number of humans. This is absolutely not true. We could double the population without any meaningful damage to the environment. So Earth, you can fit all the humans on Earth in the city of New York. That's the cross-sectional area of humans. They literally fit in the city of New York. On one floor, you don't even need high rises. And if you're on a plane flight and you look down and you say, what percentage of the time if I were to drop a ball where that ball would hit a person? Basically zero. Even in a city like LA, which you think, oh, that's a crowded city, but so looking at it from above, what's the cross-sectional area of humans relative to the rest of the ground? And it's much less than 1% even in LA. If you're in a big city environment and you see a lot of people, you sort of, there must be, you sort of extrapolate that to everywhere. But it's actually very rare to see a concentration of humans. So humans, Earth is very sparsely populated with humans. There's not enough humans, far from being too many. And I think people are still sort of operating on the assumption that population is just growing like crazy, when in fact the opposite is occurring. And these numbers are easy to look up. I mean, they're just on the internet. So, we had the lowest birth rate in recorded history last year. I'm always banging the baby drum. I'm like, man, civilization's gonna, collapse. And
no big deal.
Yeah. I'm like, where do you think people come from? Like, some magical fucking people factory? They gotta come from somewhere, and they take ages to grow. At some point, there's going to be a third world war. After World War III, who knows what's left after World War III? This race between, do we become a multi-planet species or World War III? Which one is first? And if World War III is first, then maybe we never get to another planet. One of the reasons for World War III would be if one country has advanced AI technology and the other powers want it, or they're worried about some country gaining advanced AI that would give them a strong advantage in war, then they may be tempted to attack before the country that is developing the strong AI has that for use in weapons technology. Certainly hope that SpaceX and Tesla are not forced to develop any kind of weapons technology. Obviously, we would only do such a thing if it was the last resort. I think I can be helpful in conflict. I try to take the set of actions that are most likely to improve the probability that the future will be good. There are certainly some big risks that humanity faces. Population collapse is a really big deal that I wish more people would think about. The birth rate is far below what's needed to sustain civilization at its current level. We need to take action on climate sustainability, which is being done, and we need to secure the future of consciousness by being a multi-planet species. We need to address it's important to take whatever actions we can think of to address the existential risks that affect the future of consciousness. Most people in the world are operating under the false impression that there are too many people. This is not true. Earth could maintain a population many times the current level. And the birth rate has been dropping like crazy. Unfortunately, we have these ridiculous population estimates from the UN that need to be updated because they just don't make any sense. Really, you can just look at, say, what was the birth rate last year, how many kids were born, multiply that by the life expectancy, and say, okay, that's how many people will be alive in the future. And then say, is the trend for birth rate positive or negative? It's negative. So that's the best case, unless something changes with the birth rate. Giant meteor or supervolcanoes or extreme climate change or World War III, any one of a number of reasons. But the probable lifespan of civilizational consciousness as we know it, which we should really view as this very delicate thing, like a small candle in a vast darkness. That is what appears to be the case. We're in this vast darkness of space, and there's this little candle of consciousness that's only really come about after 4.5 billion years. I think this is important for maximizing the probable lifespan of humanity with consciousness. The birth rate on Earth is so low that we're facing civilizational collapse unless the birth rate returns to a sustainable level. Population collapse
is one of the biggest threats to the future of human civilization. And that is what is going on right now.
Take Japan, for example. I think population is roughly 110 million. But last year, if you take the number of children born times the life expectancy, which is 85 years, it's very impressive life expectancy, then Japan would have, I think, around 68 million people, roughly half of the current population. That does not tell the full story because you would have an upside-down demographic pyramid. You already have an upside-down demographic pyramid where, a lot of old people, very few young people, and that upside-down demographic pyramid is unstable.
Let's also hear why we'll need alternatives. You have recently presented Optimus, human robot, and you shared great expectations what that could do for the world.
Yeah.
Could you explain a little bit your motivation? I assume it's not only about the first visit to Mars that could be done by Optimus. It is more than that, a game changer in AI. Could you share a little bit your vision?
Yeah, I mean, with respect to AI and robotics, I always approach these things with some trepidation because I certainly do not want to play a hand in anything that could potentially be harmful to humanity. Humanoid robots, they're clearly happening. I mean, you look at like Boston Dynamics, their demonstrations are better every year. So there will be humanoid robots. I mean, the rate of advancement of AI is very rapid. Even if Tesla stopped doing AI, I think we're still on a track to develop artificial general intelligence, meaning intelligence smarter than the smartest human. I guess when I was kind of growing up, I did have this like existential crisis where I was like, what's the meaning of life? Is this all pointless? Is there any point in existing at all? I read the various religious texts and I read a bunch of the philosophers. Just couldn't really seem to find any good answers. And then I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is really a book on philosophy, but it's disguised as a book on humor. And the point Douglas Adams was making is that the purpose of life is to learn more, to ultimately know what questions to learn what questions to ask about the answer that is the universe. That's the actual point, is to figure out the point. At least that was my interpretation. And so therefore we should take the set of actions that are likely to expand consciousness and our understanding of the universe so that we can know what the meaning of life is, or why we're here and how the universe came to be. Whatever is most likely to ensure that the future is good for, all of humanity. It's not like there's no good that comes out of even a terrible situation. There's some good that comes out of it, but it's overwhelmingly bad. So it's really interesting to learn the lessons of history such that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past. Generally, I'm trying to take the actions that most likely lead to a better future for civilization. I think that's frankly, the only logical thing to do, because there's no point in having a good future without civilization. If civilization crumbles, nobody's going to have a good future. So I think we want to take the set of actions that maximize the probability that the future is going to be good, and then we understand more about the nature of reality and the universe. I mean, I don't think we should try to have people live for a very long time. It would cause ossification of society, because the truth is, most people don't change their mind; they just die. And so, if they don't die, they will be stuck with old ideas, and society won't advance. I think we already have quite a serious issue with the gerontocracy, where the leaders of so many countries are extremely old. Look, I mean, in the US, it's, very, very ancient leadership. And it's just impossible to stay in touch with the people if you're, if you're many generations older than them. And the founders in the US, they put minimum ages for political office, but they did not put maximum ages, because they did not expect that people would be living so long, but they should have. Because you really want, in order for a democracy to function well, the leaders must be reasonably in touch with the bulk of the population. And if you're too young or too old, you can't say that you would be in touch. I mean, I certainly would like to maintain health for a longer period of time. But I'm not afraid of dying. I think it will come as a relief. What are the existential threats that humanity faces? We spent a lot of time talking about the birth rate thing. That might be the biggest single threat to the future of human civilization. Then there's, artificial intelligence gone wrong is a big concern.
I think religious extremism is a concern.
So there's, obviously environmental causes, there's education, especially science and engineering education, pediatric healthcare. Hunger these days is more of a political and logistics problem than it is not having enough food. There's a lot of food. In fact, in the U.S. And many countries, the issue is more obesity than it is hunger.